it's banana republic stuff if you start taking your candidate, the candidates you don't like, off the ballot based on fraud charges. We just don't stop. And, whether it be litigation, in terms of suing to get access to information about what's going on, or participating in the court process directly, Judicial Watch repeatedly stands for the rule of law against corrupt prosecutors, corrupt politicians, bureaucrats, or in the case of Colorado, corrupt courts. As we highlighted earlier, and as you may know, the Colorado Supreme Court took action that, if upheld, would remove President Trump at least from the primary ballot in Colorado. Based on these fake allegations, he engaged in an insurrection, and therefore, under the 14th Amendment, he's not allowed to be on the ballot, because you can't be on the ballot for president if you're an insurrectionist. Now, that's just wrong as a matter of the plain text of the Constitution, because the 14th Amendment doesn't mention the office of the president in that respect. And it's wrong in the sense that Colorado has no business trying to adjudicate that on its own. And even if it did, as I said, it doesn't apply to the president. So they're trying to steal the vote by keeping Trump off the election and off the ballot. And these are all left-wing judges out there. Now, to be fair, there were liberal judges who said this is too far. I think the whole Supreme Court is appointed by Democrat governors in Colorado. So there's no Clarence Thomas or Gorsuch or Kavanaugh or Alito on the Supreme Court out there. But there were, a few Elena Kagan types who were opposed to this abuse. And now it's before the Supreme Court of the United States, and Judicial Watch, along with many others, filed amicus briefs this week, and President Trump filed his brief. And I encourage you to go to the Supreme Court website, look up the docket. I think we have a link to it, and you can read all the amicus briefs. But Judicial Watch filed an amicus brief with our friends and supporters at the Allied Educational Foundation. And the Allied Educational Foundation often partners with us on these amicus briefs, and let me tell you a little bit about them. They're a charitable and educational foundation dedicated to improving the quality of life through education. In furtherance of that goal, the foundation is engaged in a number of projects, which include but are not limited to educational health conferences domestically and abroad, and it's partnered frequently with Judicial Watch to fight government and judicial corruption and to promote a return to ethics and morality in our nation's public life. Ethics and morality in our nation's public life. I think that's a pretty good goal. I know that's been a goal of Judicial Watch. So we filed this big amicus brief opposing the Colorado court decision to remove Trump from the ballot. Just to bring you up to date, there was a decision by a Secretary of State in Maine, I think is on hold, practically speaking, that also removed him from the ballot, or would have the effect of removing him from the ballot if it was allowed to proceed. Other states have knocked it back, at least for now, including, I think, Michigan and Washington State or Oregon. Well, anyway, you can look it up, but a few states have considered this, and you can bet if the Supreme Court doesn't step in, many more states will consider it, and it will be all bets off. Not only will Trump be removed from the ballot, but you can be sure that opponents of Biden will seek to remove him from the ballot under this elastic definition of insurrection the left is pretending applies to President Trump. And, we made the point how your rights are under attack by this effort to remove Trump from the ballot by states unilaterally in our amicus brief, or our amici brief with AEF. The legal and national interest is at stake in any proceeding to determine whether a candidate should be barred from running for a national office, like the presidency, are extraordinary. Those interests encompass First Amendment associational rights of members of national political parties, as well as the rights of millions of voters to express their political preferences by voting for the party's candidate. Those interests also include the national interest in conducting elections perceived to be legitimate because they reflect the wishes of the voters. The impact of banning a national candidate like President Trump from the ballot in one state is felt nationwide, as his supporters in every state reassess his chances of winning and the value of turning out to vote for him. Accordingly, any proceeding to remove President Trump from the ballot in Colorado must account for the interests of millions of Republican Party members and voters across the nation if it is to comport with the requirements of the Due Process Clause in the 14th Amendment. And there's another point here I wanted to make here from the brief that isn't in the release. Let me go find that argument in the brief. Give me a second. This is the line I wanted. By any reckoning, the number of U.S. voting-age citizens whose fundamental First Amendment rights will be affected by the outcome of this matter is enormous. Donald Trump received almost 63 million votes in 2016 and over 74 million votes in 2020. Note also that the Census Bureau currently estimates the U.S. population as close to 335 million persons. About 262 million of them are over the age of 18. In a recent Gallup poll, 43% of adults identified as Republican or Republican-leaning. Extrapolated to the national population, that poll suggests that perhaps 113 million adults are likely to be Republican or Republican-leaning. A significant number of them may vote for President Trump if he is again the nominee. All their interests are present here. As the court has prudently observed, meaning the Supreme Court, the impact of the votes cast in each state is affected by the votes cast for the various candidates in other states, so that access to the ballot in any one state has an impact beyond its own borders. To be specific, the impact of banning a national candidate like President Trump from the ballot in one state is felt nationwide, as his supporters in every state reassess his chances of winning and the value of turning out for him. And then, of course, you know, what's going to ensue if the Supreme Court doesn't put a stop to this? You know, and I highlighted the issues at stake here. Let's take a break and go to the video of Mike trying to summarize what's in the brief here. Hey everyone, Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton here with a big update. We just filed an amicus brief with the United States Supreme Court opposing the left's efforts to keep Trump off the ballot using their fake insurrection charges under the 14th Amendment. As our lawyers point out in the brief, the left's attack on Trump violates not only Trump's rights, but the due process rights and First Amendment rights of tens of millions of Americans. This is a coup against the Constitution, an effort to turn America into a one-party state by keeping Trump off the ballot, and the Supreme Court should just say no to this attack on our system. The United States has an interest in being able to credibly maintain that national elections are decided by voters who are persuaded, for various reasons, to cast their ballots for particular candidates. Where this is so, the outcome of the election may be relied on to reasonably reflect what the American people want, but this claim is undermined when it appears that the machinations of partisan bureaucrats and lawyers are more important in determining the outcome of an election than the will of voters. And chaos will follow if the Supreme Court doesn't step up, our lawyers allege in this brief. In a basically standardless legal discussion, charges of insurrection can be leveled by imaginative partisans on the basis of many different kinds of inflammatory political actions or speech. Consider Vice President Kamala Harris promoted a bail fund that helped to free those protesting on the ground in Minnesota in the wake of the murder of George Floyd. The protests in 20 states following that murder were among the costliest in U.S. history, persisting in some cities for months and resulting in at least 25 deaths. Protesters attacked federal property and set fire to a federal courthouse. Protests also caused President Trump to evacuate the White House to a secure underground location as rioters assaulted police officers outside the White House gates. So did Kamala Harris engage in insurrection and others who supported those riots in 2020? I would argue yes. I would argue yes. When you look at the language they use to support tearing down society and our government. Kamala Harris, should she be removed from the ballot? Discussing an anticipated abortion ruling, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer told a rally on the steps of the United States Supreme Court on March 5th, 2020, which I considered the year of insurrection, and it was the leftist insurrection. I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind and you will pay the price. You won't know what hit you if you go forward with these awful decisions. Does that sound like a threat to you? It sounds like a threat to me. If I came up to you and said, you won't know what hit you, you'd be threatened, wouldn't you? He was threatening Supreme Court justices. He should have been criminally investigated for that, in my view. Indeed, his comments were approved by the Chief Justice of this court, Chief Justice Roberts, as dangerous. 2 years later, a man was arrested for threatening behavior directed at Justice Kavanaugh. Actually, he was arrested for much more, for attempting to murder Kavanaugh. That's the charge, as I recall, that's pending. That's what they incited and continued to incite threats and intimidation directed at the Supreme Court. Is that insurrection? Dare I say it, yes. At least under their definitions. The court should foreclose this kind of warfare now. We respectfully submit that the court should refuse to ratify these maneuvers to take Trump off the ballot and should instead adopt as its policy the observation that the cure for the evils of democracy is more democracy. If you don't like Trump, run against him. Put out your ads, organize your voters, do what you do in a Republican election. And I mean Republican with a small r. The rule of law prevails. But it's banana republic stuff if you start taking the candidates you don't like off the ballot based on fraud charges. And you know what? If you, or let me be clear, the left's effort to fraudulently use charges of insurrection that are without foundation to remove Trump from the ballot, I would argue, is insurrection. Are these judges insurrectionists? Maybe. All bets are off unless the Supreme Court takes action. And of course, you know what? I say chaos as if the left thinks that's a bad thing. They want chaos. I mean, we're in a revolutionary period spurred on by the left, urged on by the left. And that means attacking all of our structures of government, our institutions, our elections. They don't like elections. I mean, they just don't want dirty elections, in my view. They want no elections. And we see that with the attack on Trump, trying to jail him and remove him from the ballot. And I don't know about you, but I think it's worth fighting to have free and fair elections in the United States. Republicans on the Hill don't think it's worth fighting. The media applauds it. But Judicial Watch will stand for you, the American people, and voters of both parties who want to be able to decide who governs them. Because the very idea of self-government is under attack by the left. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.